You've heard all the tropes about failure at work. You either win or you learn.
It doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down. It's about how many times you get back up.
Failure is just the first step to the path to success. Well, we're here to tell you why all of that is BS.
And how you can bounce back from failure at work.
Let's get into it. Kayla, I'm here to start with the softball question. Tell me about your biggest failure at work.
Great. Okay, cut the cameras. Let's go. So obviously before this, we were thinking about what our biggest failures are, and I have a few.
Okay.
I'm not perfect. But I think the biggest macro failure that I've experienced at work was obviously the shutting down of the division of Morning Brew Learning.
That we both worked at.
And
okay.
I think we definitely felt, not to speak for you necessarily, but we definitely felt like we had a big hand in that, in the development of that division. Mm-hmm. And so when it got sunset or shut down, I personally took a lot of responsibility. I felt a lot of responsibility for that.
Yeah.
And part of me is well, you're not really that important. Stop. Don't think about yourself so much. But I did really take it personally. I was like, well, maybe if the content was better or the courses were better, I could have made it work.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really hard. And the way that I bounced back, I don't recommend anyone do that. I took
drugs.
No, I took it horribly. It took me a year to actually get back into a good headspace about work. I was like, well, if I'm bad at writing, if my my contributions are what helped this product not go well, I shouldn't be writing.
It's interesting. There's a bit of a double-edged sword around ownership where if you feel like I can make a difference and I can make this product great, when it doesn't work, then you have to kind of apply that same philosophy back into yourself and say, oh, wait, I'm actually not good enough. I could have made it work and it didn't. So it is this weird thing where you have to believe you can have impact. And then again, when it explodes or fails, you're like, damn, am I not good enough?
Am I bad? Yeah. What is yours?
I have a follow-up question.
Okay.
You said it took you a year to get back in a good headspace. So this affected your psyche pretty tremendously.
Yeah, for sure.
Were there any particular things you did to regain confidence, regain composure, bounce back from that failure, or was it literally just time?
I think it was time.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not I have actual tactics that I think will actually help somebody bounce back from failure. But the reality is for me, what I did was
we're not going to share those now. You got to listen to the full episode.
Yeah, wait until a little later. But I did feel like I kind of rejected everything that I had been doing, writing, managing, building content. And I was like, I wasn't interested in doing that anymore. So I was like, I want to be judged exclusively by the revenue that I bring in. And that worked for about a year. I was like, I'd rather be bored at work than challenged right now because I feel like I was challenged and I failed.
Interesting.
So that did have an impact. And then slowly, once I was like, okay, I'm actually still kind of bored and I would like to be challenged again, taking on new projects, getting that confidence back is kind of what worked, was microdosing difficult challenges at work.
Very interesting. The point about getting more quantitative metrics as well after, we were kind of in this messy middle where you don't know if something's working or not until it either succeeds or fails. And when it fails, I do think you have an instinct to be like, I want to be judged by the cleanest, clearest number possible, and that's it. So I always know where I'm headed, and then there's no fear of it shutting down if I exceed this number. So I think that's a very normal response to this event. It's funny because I'm sure I was affected, but I also have optimism brain where I forget how I actually felt, and I was like, oh, I was probably fine just the next day, shit happens. But again, I don't know if that's necessarily the best mindset to drive success when you're actually in it either. So it is an interesting kind of contradiction where you need to be fully locked in and believe that you can make a difference. And then when it fails, somehow being like, well, it's not on me and I'm going to move on quickly.
Yeah.
And that's tough to do. Should I share my big failure?
Yeah, please do.
I would love to. Okay, so this is one that you were at least witness to. So hold me accountable.
Okay, will do.
If this is not true, I might be exaggerating in my mind, but this is how it felt, at least from my perspective. So I am 2 months into my job at Morning Brew. And as Kayla alluded to, the division that ultimately got shut down 3 years later, was about to launch in 1 month. And I was in charge of building a deck that would basically be the orientation presentation for all the people who are first going to take this 8-week mini MBA course. And pretty much I did everything wrong leading up to the like run through presentation to senior leadership at the company at the time. I like did not talk to my manager, which was Kaila at the time. Now we're co-hosts, so you know,
it worked out.
Pretty incredible rise for me. And I built it in isolation. I didn't even use Google Slides. I was like, I'm going to use Keynote.
Yeah, that one was rough.
I think like Tim Cook was like, wait, we have one user on Keynote. Like, find this man. Like, holy who's using this? And so then I go to present. It's me sharing screen, all of senior leadership and like the division gonna see this orientation. I remember by slide like 3, I knew, oh, it's over for me. I was cottonmouth. Whenever you get cottonmouth in a presentation, game over.
Yeah.
It was going so poorly. The script, the talk track was terrible. I probably had way too much animation. And I remember Alex or someone literally being like, stop. I was through like 10% of this presentation. He's like, stop. This is terrible. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. Fix that. Like, we got to go back to basically square one. And then it ended and it was like, go do that and then come back. And I remember hanging up. Well, first, is that accurate? Is that how you remember it?
Well, yes, but I have a different interpretation of what happened after.
You were like, it was worse, quite frankly.
No. It was not great.
Yeah.
But I'm continuing.
Okay. So what happened after is, one, I was like, probably an hour, like very embarrassed because I was like, damn, like I really just took a massive L in front of the most senior people in the company. I'm only 2 months into my tenure. Like, time to hop back on LinkedIn and start applying to jobs. Here we go. But when what I was proud of is when I was getting feedback, I like assumed it was true. And I did actually believe it was true at the time. And I realized like I went about preparing this the wrong way. I should have really been checking in on like what other people's expectations were and what they wanted to see in this presentation. I should have been doing dry runs with you. And so the feedback was actually very helpful. I just wish I would have gotten it earlier, and that's on me. And I took the feedback, I think, in a really positive way. I made the changes, and eventually we got it to a really great spot. And like, I genuinely am a really good presenter, so I had confidence that that wasn't the issue. It was just the lead up. And I ultimately think what happened is Alex and other senior leaders, like, you're never proud of someone for really eating shit, but if they do it and they take feedback and they respond really well to it, and then they come out with something even better, you actually like them a lot more and you have a lot more confidence in them going forward. So it was a big failure in the moment that turned out, because I did the appropriate things after, to be a really big success, I think, for me. So was that your reaction as well?
Well, it's funny because I wouldn't view that as a professional failure for you.
Okay.
But I don't know if we've talked about this, but I actually got yelled at after that presentation.
I think we did, yeah.
Like
so basically my story is my biggest professional failure was your fault.
Yeah, I got yelled at because my boss at the time was like, why didn't I see this beforehand?
Right.
And I was like, well, I kind of hadn't seen it beforehand. I just like, this is his thing. Like, what am I going to do? Like, tell him how to do his job? And he was like, yes.
Yeah, that's your job.
He was like, you dumb idiot. He didn't actually say that, but that's how I felt. So I felt like it was a professional failure for me.
Yeah.
Because I was like, yeah, this is what he's hired to do. I don't know community. I don't know, how to do this type of presentation, orientation, anything like that. Why would I look at it?
Yeah.
He's got it. And so then I think you did a very good job of bouncing back and all of that. But it was also an eye-opening moment for me where I was like, I think I'm doing this whole management thing wrong.
Interesting.
And so then we kind of both readjusted, and I think we got better. And, I had you look at a lot of my stuff. We just needed like a gut check.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I looked at your stuff more, you looked at my stuff more, and it just like, we slowly got things better.
Yeah. And I think I remember like talking to Alex after and him saying something to the effect of like, you took the feedback very well. And like, when I then did the presentation again, I could tell like that did engender a lot of like trust that if they gave our division feedback, we were going to respond positively. And if we like really ate it, we were going to do everything in our power to not do that again. So yeah, I think the response to something that could be a failure short term dictates if it's going to be, a quote unquote learning long term. Now, we opened this episode dunking on some of these tropes. And so now that we've been a little vulnerable and shared our failures.
Now you guys have to like us. You can't
exactly.
be mean.
We've tricked you. Let's talk about some of these tropes. So the one that referenced was, I think it's a Nelson Mandela quote, but this feels like apocryphal. Like everyone says it's everyone's quote. Like Jesus,
No, this is
Jesus probably said this.
I do believe that Nelson Mandela did say this quote. It's I don't fail, I either win or I learn.
Yeah.
Which in first glance I think is like, wow, that's genius.
Brilliant.
Also, it's important to note that Nelson Mandela was like fighting human rights abuses.
Yeah.
Like we're sending emails.
Yeah.
Like chill
I think he
out.
literally brought down apartheid, and we're like,
literally.
we're spell checking.
Like let's not make it that serious,
Right.
people.
But let's analyze the
Okay,
quote.
go ahead.
What's your problem with the quote?
Okay, I have a big problem with this
Yeah.
quote. For one of the reasons that I just said is like this is not that serious, but also I think there's this real like this works. Every failure is a learning opportunity. I agree with 100%. If you're going into the failure like trying your best and like doing the most and like appreciating, every whatever failure, quote unquote, as a learning opportunity, I think this sometimes in the wrong hands can justify a lack of action.
Yeah.
So like, well, I didn't do my best and like I didn't try that hard and I didn't really care, but like it was a learning opportunity for me. It's like, okay, well, like screw you.
Maybe
actually
you should actually try to win.
Yeah, how about you try a little bit? And like it just I feel like excuses bad behavior, and it's one of those like therapy speak things. It's like in the wrong
It sounds
hands.
really good, but then
it can be
Jonah
used.
Hill gets a hold of it.
Exactly. And you're like, come on, guys. Like,
Yeah.
let's show. Do you have a similar?
Well, I want to come back to that. My issue with the quote is that it assumes that learning is going to happen automatically.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people say, well, you're either going to win or you're going to learn. And then they fail and they don't do any reflection. And I genuinely think most people, they don't actually do any sort of postmortems around why they failed. So if we want to talk about one tactic early on how to bounce back from failure at work, it's recognizing that when you fail, you're not automatically going to learn a lesson. You actually have to sit and think about, why did I fail? Was it lack of preparation? What was in my control that I could have done better that time? Like actually sit down, break down the failure, and then think, next time when I'm faced with this scenario, how would I respond differently to increase my odds of success? It is an active learning process, and something that we did all the time for every single course we ran in the past was we'd do a postmortem, and we'd look at things that didn't go well, and we would decide collectively, like, why? What could we have done differently? If you're not actually asking yourself those questions, you're just going, I'll learn from this. Yeah, I've seen people keep making the same mistake time and time and time again because they're not actually learning. So that's my first issue with the quote. Learning is not automatic. You have to put effort into it. The second is exactly what you're saying. It's this idea that like a growth mindset is good always. And this, I think, is a really interesting thing.
I've defined growth mindset really quick.
Yeah, and I've recently changed my mind around this. So growth mindset, it is part of psychology that was really popularized by Carol Dweck. And it's the idea that intelligence is not like innate, it's flexible, and you can learn and you can fail and get back up again and grow. One of the outcomes of her research has been that you should praise people for effort and not outcome, because when you're very reliant on outcomes, then you tend to shy away from challenges. You've made being good at something part of your identity. So failing, it like hurts your identity, and you should praise effort. Like you tried really hard and that's good. So on first glance, that stuff works. And I think having a growth mindset long-term is really important. The issue is what you're alluding to. When you go into a big presentation and you're thinking, if I really mess this up, it's kind of cool. I'm going to learn. Yeah. That's fun. Like if I fail, that's fine. That's actually not what you want. You do need a fixed mindset when you have a moment of acute pressure, acute stress, like a big game, a big presentation, a deadline coming up. You want to be thinking, no, I need to make this work, not if I fail, it's fine.
Yeah.
And so we worked with a sports psychologist, Alex Auerbach. He was the director of wellness for the Toronto Raptors. And he really brought this to our attention. It's something that stuck with me. He's like, when you're going to the free throw line, it's game 7 of the NBA Finals. You either need to make this to win, or if you miss it, your team might lose. You do not want to be thinking, if I miss and we don't win this championship, man, what a great lesson this will be for the team. You want to be like, no, this matters, and I really need to win. So it's balancing this idea that you, sure, long-term want to be able to bounce back from failure, but failure is not the goal, and you want to win. And that's what I think the quote kind of obfuscates a bit.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I remember when we were in that call with Alex, and he said that, I had first had this like really negative reaction to what he was saying. Like, growth mindset isn't always the right approach.
Yeah.
Because it feels very like kind of hard ass to be like, you don't want to fail. Like, like, and of course you don't, but it's like, it feels like, you know, the last, I don't know, decade or so has been rectifying a lot of the like harshness that we had with ourselves and with our teams at work.
Yep.
And so now it's like, okay, well, there's time and places for both. And I think that when you're approaching all opportunities that could end in failure as learning opportunities and not as like important high pressure moments, you're also missing out on opportunities to succeed.
Yes.
You know, if you're like, oh, failure's fine, then you're kind of defaulting to failure, which is not great.
And it's really interesting. I agree. Like to correct our past misgivings, which was like hard ass, if you fail, you're a failure.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to tie failure to your identity long term. But I do think we've then embraced this like failure is actually good. Like failure is just learning and then you keep learning and then eventually you succeed. But I do think if you don't have the pressure that like you need to succeed, you probably won't. And so this embrace of failure as learning kind of gets in the way of, hey, you might want to succeed now and then. And my former boss had this great quote that was, you have to be unafraid of failure, yet unwilling to fail. And I really like that.
I like that. I haven't heard that.
You can't be afraid of failure because then you will not try to go after big, bold, audacious goals. But you have to be unwilling to fail. Like you can't accept, even if I fail, it's fine. Like it is this really weird, contradictory balance. But I think the most successful people have long-term growth mindset, short-term fixed mindset, and just make that contradiction work for them.
And we'll be right back after this. Okay, back to the show.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think one of the things that pisses me off so much about the you win or you learn mindset at work when you're not, you know, ending apartheid is like, especially if you're higher up, you're a manager, you run a team, like saying, failure is like, it's a learning opportunity. It's like, okay, people might lose their jobs.
My whole team got fired. Great lesson, right?
Yeah, like
Great
I'm just
lesson,
going to move
everyone.
on and try something else. It's like, okay, well now 6 people have to like find new jobs.
Six people are on healthcare.gov. You know how crazy that website is? It's terrible.
So I think that there's some benefits of both, but this quote in particular makes me a little frustrated when it's used in this context.
Agreed. I want to bring up one study that I found really interesting about this kind of concept of failure. And it was a study of nurses through the NIH, which I think is like the National Institute of Health.
That makes sense.
Okay, acronym King. And they did a study of nurses that were starting out in their career and that experienced failure early. And what they found is that it kind of had these like polar opposite effects. So for 10% of the nurses that had an early career failure, it actually increased the rate of attrition. Like it increased their odds of leaving. So it kind of makes sense. Like you're early, you have a massive failure and you're like, maybe I'm not cut out for this, and you leave. For the nurses that stuck around from their early failure and stuck with it, they actually outperformed those that did not have an early failure. So it was the idea that those that went through it, learned from it, were resilient, reflected, thought about what they did wrong, that actually enabled them to grow their career faster and be more successful long term. And so I think it's actually, this study kind of points to what we're talking about. There is one way to view failure as a way to find fit. So like if you keep failing, sometimes you should ask yourself, am I actually working on the right thing?
Right.
Like if I failed my first presentation and then they gave me feedback and I was like, okay, time to do it again. A week later, I go, they stop me 10 minutes in and they're like, this still sucks. I shouldn't be like, another great learning, let's do it again. Eventually you should be like, this isn't the right fit for me. I'm not meant to be a nurse. I'm not meant to be a presenter.
Or I'm doing something wrong, I need to change my approach.
Yeah, exactly. But if you keep trying and keep failing, move on. You just realized you used failure as a lesson, you're not in the right fit. Go find where it comes naturally to you. Go find a better fit. However, this other branch of outcomes was kind of like what I experienced, where I failed the first time, but it kind of let me recalibrate. It let me learn, oh, I should be going about it this way, and this is the expectations. It gave me a lot of clarity, and the next presentation was better than probably what the first one would have been if I did that all stuff earlier and didn't get that feedback. So I just thought that study was really illuminative, that failure can have kind of two effects on you. One can be a learning tool, I shouldn't be doing this, or two, it can actually accelerate growth if you're reflective and if you're learning from that failure.
But I will say, like, I do think that in your situation, your early failure, like, also kind of removed the stakes a little bit on trying.
Okay.
Because you're like, wow, I like really messed up, in your words. Like, this was like, I bombed. Like,
in front of the most important people at the company.
And like, what were the consequences for that? I felt embarrassed for an hour, and then I made a much better presentation that's going to convert way more people and get way more people excited about this product.
Yeah.
So like, I can try and put myself out there again because I know that the worst that's going to happen is I'm embarrassed for an hour.
Yep.
So I think that's also like, again, I hate that you learn or you win or whatever.
Yeah.
But it is an opportunity to kind of remove some of the scariness around trying hard, which is what your former boss, I'm assuming was Chuck, said about that. Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I like what you said because it's kind of like redefining failure in a way. And I do think the common conception of failure is you either, you win or you fail. It's very like black and white. It's very binary. It's a 1 or a 0, win or lose. And most situations in life, I think, are gray. And, if you're looking at a big project, the project might have gone okay. There's elements that went very well, and there's elements that didn't go very well. This is, again, why I think these postmortems are very helpful, because it allows you to, like, identify what didn't go right, try to get feedback on that, and then improve those elements while still recognizing that over here, a lot went well. And so I think another tactic is to almost like view failure not as binary, but as a spectrum, and then become like a feedback magnet. Like, get really good at receiving feedback so you can improve. Because I do think a lot of people, they fail and they're really embarrassed and they don't want to hear it from other people. It's like hurts their ego. Then you don't get feedback, you don't get learning, and you ultimately don't improve. And also, we've definitely worked with people where like you give them feedback and they respond so negatively to it that you're like, I'm never giving them feedback again because like they're not going to take it seriously and it's just a weird conversation. And then you kind of like insulate yourself or isolate yourself from actually getting good feedback and improving. So yeah, responding to failure in a way that's like kind of welcoming after the fact is very important too.
Yeah, so this was one of the tactics that I wrote down, which is like get ahead of it, communicate it. When you have a failure, when you identify in yourself that you failed, first of all, like you're probably your greatest critic, I'd say.
Yeah.
There are probably some people in which that doesn't apply. But the chances are you've probably identified a failure in yourself or in your team before anyone else has. And so getting ahead of that, communicating that, hey, I'm noticing that this is going poorly. We wanted, 20 people to sign up for this, and we're only at 7. It's 3 weeks before the deadline. I'm getting a little nervous that we might not hit it. That allows for, even if it's just like a mental shift, the outcome hasn't changed. You're still needing to get 13 more people to sign up for this product. But because you're the one bringing it to a group or your boss, it almost feels like you're in control there. Like I've got this handled. I've identified that there's a problem, and I'm coming to you for feedback to keep you in the loop and to see if there's anything that we can do to change course to prevent it from being a bigger failure than it needs to be.
Yeah.
And I think that even though that doesn't change the outcome, that does change your like locus of control a little bit. It makes you feel like you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that advice is like really, really strong. And I love the idea of like you're in control of how things aren't going and you're communicating that clearly. It does like, while people recognize, well, we wish it was going better, they also view you as like very competent, on the ball, unafraid to bring them mistakes. I think we've talked about this on several other podcasts, like managing up, the goal is like no surprises. And so if you try to hide a failure for a long time, then it becomes even bigger and people are like, why are you bringing this to me now? You should have brought it to me like 3 weeks ago. So yeah, being okay when things are getting off track and the confidence that, hey, I'm going to tell you and we're going to brainstorm how to get it back on track. Very, very good idea. I want to talk about post-traumatic growth because that is also this like this phrase that's kind of entered the lexicon recently.
This feels a little like too serious for for what we do, but I'll allow it.
Yeah, we will caveat again. This is at work.
We're on computers.
We're sending emails. We're hitting the keys in the right order.
Let's hear how we can apply.
But I think it makes sense. Like, okay, when you have a failure, like, how do people actually grow from things that don't go well? And this was according to the APA, the American Psychological Association. There's like certain elements that you need in order to allow yourself to actually learn. The first is community. We just talked about this, which is like having a group of supportive people that you can talk openly about your failure with. They can support you. You can brainstorm ideas. So like finding your tribe at work where you can, take a massive L to them and they can support you, or, a peer group outside of work. The second is actually like physical well-being. Like, I don't know however many times I've been so stressed and I just slept for 8 hours and I'm like, why was I worried about that? Like, it's all going to be okay. Or take a walk and you solve all of your problems. Like, the people who just said drink water, it helps. Damn. It turns out they were right.
We're just plants.
The other one was like purpose and kind of taking a step back and reflecting on like why you're doing the work and the ultimate meaning of the work can kind of help you get back up on the saddle and go again. The other is just recognizing that goals are very long term and like a minor setback, if you learn from it, can really, you just kind of keep going up and to the right, hopefully. And then the last is an opportunity for self-discovery. I think this is kind of the cool part about all failure. And it's going back to this fit piece. It might be that like you're failing because you're not good at the thing. And you might never get good at the thing. And that's okay. Like an opportunity to say, hey, I keep running into a wall here. Like, is this actually what I want to be doing? Is this actually where I can have the most value, find the most like energy and excitement for my career? Like maybe this is an opportunity to think about a career pivot or moving into, a new role inside the same company. So just always taking failure as an opportunity to dive a little bit deeper and see if you actually should be doing the thing that you're failing at. People that exhibit those like qualities often grow more from failure than their peer set.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we've kind of like circled around but haven't necessarily directly acknowledged is that we're talking about failure in the face of trying. I don't really know how else to say that. Like, I gave this my all and I failed hurts way more than I didn't try at all and I failed because I didn't try. It doesn't matter that I failed.
It was like, I feel like me in like 8th grade when I was like, didn't even study for this test. Got to be still. Like, it's like protecting yourself from trying and failing and then having hit your identity so you don't try.
Yeah.
And that's not what we want either.
That is the type of failure that I think genuinely pisses me off when I see it in other people, but also when I see it in myself, because it's a protective thing, And so one of we talked about our biggest professional failures, and on a macro level at Morning Brew Learning, like shutting down was that for me. But on a micro level, every time that I approach a project or something and realize that I'm underprepared or that I didn't communicate effectively, or it's something like something did not go my way because I did not take the steps to get there versus like I really tried and it just didn't work out. Those piss me off the most. When I'm like, I really am hard on myself when I'm like, why didn't I just take an hour to prep for this meeting? Like I had the time. Like I was getting to inbox 0. That doesn't matter. So I think that those for me personally are the ones that make me the most upset. And that's when all of the things that we've talked about already like kind of are negated for me.
Yeah. I love that. And I think it's a great tactic, which is like the phrasing I have for it that's coming to mind is like, where are you trying to be too cool? Like where you're like not trying as like on a protective thing. Like I think it is cool to go all in and like try and care and like,
okay, nerd.
When you like eat shit, you're like, damn, that hurts. And like it does because you gave it your all. And so I think, at least trying to see how far you really can go before putting up these like defense mechanisms is really important. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground, including apartheid. I didn't have that on the bingo card today.
Yep.
Let's end with like tactics.
Sure.
So we just covered a ton of ground. You're listening to this episode. You want to be able to bounce back from failure more effectively at work. Kayla, what are you telling our listeners?
Yes, I have 3. So the first one is take failure seriously, not personally.
Ooh.
So
okay. Poet and I didn't even know it. Come on now.
I did write this down not knowing your other, now I've forgotten the quote that you said that I really liked, which was like, be unwilling to fail, but don't be afraid of failure. Yeah. Feels very similar, which is like, take it seriously when you fail, but don't beat yourself up about it. This is a learning opportunity if you choose to learn from it.
Yep.
And if you really did go into it trying hard and trying to succeed. And so I think there's always going to be this element of like, I'm a failure when you experience a failure. Those two are not the same thing.
Yep.
Nobody is a failure.
Yep.
Well, okay. Second is do the postmortems after projects. Even if something was an absolute knockout success, identify why it was a success. Identify the things that could have made things better. This is something I think you and your team on the community side of Morning Brew Learning did really, really well, and something that I've taken into my career moving forward. And finally, communicate, as I mentioned earlier, get ahead of things. It feels a lot less like a failure when you're communicating effectively what's going wrong and why it's going wrong while it's going wrong, instead of, now I feel like I need to CYA or like cover my ass because something has gone horribly wrong and I haven't communicated it. Ignoring failure does not mean that other people are not noticing your failure.
Yeah.
And so those are my three. What are yours?
I love it. Also, I did not know what CYA meant. So another learning for me on this episode. Okay, my tactics, long-term growth mindset that you can learn from failures, you can grow. Short-term fixed mindset, like when you're in the heat of the moment, you don't want to be thinking about how if you fail, it'll be a great lesson. You want to be thinking about how you're going to crush it.
Yep.
Second is self-reflection. The I either win or learn quote, learning doesn't come automatically. You have to be reflective. So whether that's a postmortem, whether that's a self-reflection process you do just personally, whether that's a meditative exercise, like you have to reflect in order to learn. And a lot of people skip that step. Third is community. Like you're going to fail in life in some areas. And the best way to have that post-traumatic growth, so to speak, is to have a group of people you're comfortable talking about that can support you. So find that tribe. Fourth is, I think failure does build authenticity. There's a reason why we tricked you all in the beginning of this episode by sharing our own failure. It makes you feel human.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, this isn't like, I hate when like a very successful CEO is like, I fail all the time and like, I actually don't know what I'm doing. Shut up.
Yeah.
It's not that. It is just saying like, yeah, I've failed, but here's the steps I took to learn from that failure and here's how I made sure it never happened again. I think people really respond to that because they relate to that. We're all going to have that scenario. And then last, this idea is like using failure to find fit, using these as experiments to decide, should I even be doing this at all or should I go try to find something else? Those are my 5 tactics. Looks like no one's going to fail ever again.
I think we solved it.
All right.
That
Well,
joke every time. It always hits.
Another thing solved on per my last email. Should we roll the credits?
Let's do it.
Our producer has been Kaila Heck.
Our technical directors, Yuchana Ogo.
Olivia Lake is our associate producer for Morning Brew Daily.
And our president is Devin Emery.
This show is a production of Morning Brew.
Thank you for listening.
Enjoy never failing again. You either win or you learn.
Get down 5 times, get up 6. What was that? Why did I say that? It doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down. It matters how many times you get knocked up. No.